Hey guys, it's Stephen here, back with another video, and I know what you're thinking. What are you doing today, Stephen? Look, I'm doing what I can do. There's absolutely nothing going on in the world of Manchester City Football Club right now. It's utterly dead, and I want to make some videos. I want to talk about football, and I saw a narrative going around online about Manchester City's treble winners from 2022-2023 versus PSG's treble winners of last season, and who would come out on top. And I thought I would jump on and definitely not be extremely biased, sat here in my City shirt, in my City theme studio, on my City theme channel, and talk about the game. You probably know which way this is going to go already, but I thought it was an interesting discussion anyway, something to talk about for 10 minutes or so and have a bit of a chat about football, while hopefully City prepare some news for us in the coming weeks or days, because it really is dead in the world of City right now. There's nothing going on. It's so quiet. The players are clearly on holiday, and I thought this was an interesting discussion which I've seen online an awful lot, especially after the context of PSG losing 3-0 to Chelsea last night in the Club World Cup final. And I know why we're looking back, it's just a bit of fun. Sometimes you have a little bit of fun. If you want to see more of these kind of hypothetical discussion videos, just because these are the kind of things we talk about in the pub or whatever, on your WhatsApp groups, on the playground if you're at school, wherever, let me know. And give the video a like in the description. Let me know your thoughts and all the usual stuff, and subscribe. So I'm going to talk about this. This PSG side that won the treble last year, a cracking side. I'm going to tell you why, though, the Man City side would still beat the PSG side of 24-25. I truly believe this. I truly believe it. Look, I'm going to immediately go through the sides and, and talk about what both of these sides achieved and just how good the PSG side is, and so on, and what they could potentially achieve in the future. But I do think it's a different level here, what we're talking about. That City side was a special side that people have already started to downplay. I've seen it an awful lot, and it's already driving me mad. City asking, people asking, they've shown them exactly what they should be doing. City side was brilliant that year. Absolutely remarkable. And to get beaten by Chelsea, by the way, it shows that this PSG side have got an awful long way to go in terms of, development. They're a younger side, and they're striking while the iron's hot and all that kind of stuff, and fair enough. But I'm going to go through the sides individually. Now, you've got to look at the City sides against Inter Milan in the final. City basically had, that whole campaign was an aggressively strong nullification of teams with individual brilliance and power and experience backing that up. I'll go through the PSG side, and what you've got there, Donnarumma in goal. You've got Hakimi. It was Marquinhos. Against Chelsea, it was Marquinhos and Beraldo, and then Nuno Mendes. Then you got the midfield of Joao Neves, Vitinha, and Ruiz. Then you had people like Doué, Dembele, and Kvaratskhelia sort of up top. Who played a centre back alongside Marquinhos? What's his name? Was he Pacho? I've forgotten his name. That fella, anyway. The other centre back. But either way, it was a very good PSG side, but I really don't think it's close. I think if you look at what Manchester City side was that day, you go through the keeper, Ederson was in great form. You go through the fullbacks, so we had a very different type. They have obviously the attacking fullbacks of Mendes and Hakimi, but we had absolute warriors who shut teams down. If it wasn't Kyle Walker, it was a Kanji in the form of his life at right back, who was unbelievably strong and aggressive and good on the ball. But you had Kyle Walker, who was probably arguably a cheat code, one of the best defensive fullbacks of all time in the history of football. Truly is. Who was shutting down people like Mbappe and so on, on the right. And then you had at the centre, John Stones playing at a level that saw him win, man of the match in the Champions League final. A ridiculously fluid role, and Diaz at his very best in the partnership with John Stones. And Ake, just intensely reliable, world class as a defensive fullback on that side, who would not let anything past him. The camaraderie and the cohesion, they would not let teams score. They were so physically smothering, so structured, so organised. And then you get to the midfield as well. And the thing that I'm going to lean on heavily here was experience and timing of when players peak at the very best. You had Rodri approaching Ballon d'Or levels. Rodri scoring, with his left foot, screamers against Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarterfinals, and you had Kevin De Bruyne being Kevin De Bruyne, an utter genius. You had Gundogan playing at his very best, his peak just before he started to dip, with the experience, the composure, that clutch gene. You had control and you had power power as well. Then you had Jack Grealish in the form of his life, who would keep the ball and drive it up the pitch for you, who would create chances indirectly often, the pass before the assist, but he was great at smothering teams as well. Then out wide on the right, you had Mahrez, or you had Bernardo Silva, who was at his very best in terms of his work rate, his big game attitude, keeping the ball, his defensive structure, his organisation. You had Haaland, who should have won a Ballon d'Or that year, an absolute brilliantly smothering Manchester City side full of aggression and power. I remember watching that City side in the run-in against Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium, and Arsenal right then were firing. This was the birth of this Arsenal side that was taken off. He, in the end, bottled it against City as we went on to win the league, and we big brothered them. We really did. Like the physical power on show from Manchester City was remarkable. And I look at this PSG side and with all the ability that they've got, and as well as they keep the ball. But I don't think anyone kept the ball as well as that City side that year. They were so good at it. But I don't think anyone was as physically imposing. I think we forget just how big that side that was. Of course, you have your keeper. And Kyle Walker's only about 5'11", but Akanji is at least 6 foot. But then you had, obviously, the 6 foot plus centre-backs of Stones and Diaz. Then you had Ake, who was 5'11", but, 5'10", 5'11", but holds himself and leaps like a 6-footer and physically imposing and pacey. Then you had the physically imposing Kevin De Bruyne, who is physically imposing, Rodri. I mean, Gundogan's 5'10". Jack Grealish is 5'11", but strong and worked really hard. Bernardo Silva's small, but an absolute wasp of a player. Then Haaland, an absolute brutal beast. Loads of these players were pushing 6 foot and strong and powerful and worked hard. And there was, as Jack Grealish said, an invincibility about that Manchester City side where they felt like they could go out and beat anyone. And they did. And I know, like PSG, beat some very good sides on the way to winning the Champions League, but I truly do believe that the results are a different level. I think the sides that City played in their run were better. I think they were. I think European football was on a better thing. Look, they beat to get there. They beat some really good sides. They beat an Arsenal side, but that wasn't... No, Brian, comparing... Because it's Brian said, let's stop comparing. Let's go next season. I mean, what else? There's nothing else to talk about, mate. So let's have a little bit of fun. I think, and as a City fan, we've got every right to defend the quality of that City side. I think it's underrated. I think the treble side is underrated. You had everything. You had individual brilliance of De Bruyne, of Rodri, of Gundogan, of Mahrez, of Foden coming off the bench in that final, of Haaland. You had the power and the composure and leadership of De Bruyne, Gundogan, Rodri, Diaz and Stones. And then you had the physical freaks of people like Kyle Walker in goal. In goal, Ederson, who was the best distribution keeper and also had a great run in goal. And you had Haaland, who should have won a Ballon d'Or that year. I think that City side is honestly unbeaten. Honestly, more or less unbeatable at that point. They were absolutely wonderful. Yeah, unbeaten at home for nearly 2 years. And Rodri, won about 70 games without losing in a City shirt as well. It was absolutely absurd. And then you had the bench as well. The quality of the bench. People like Laporte was on the bench. Yeah, that in the final, Foden and Walker were on the bench too. It was ridiculous. Like, the City side is genuinely, it's insanely talented. And I think people play it down. And once again, look... Go head to head. Donnarumma or Ederson. Look, Guardiola would choose, obviously, Ederson. Donnarumma is a fantastic keeper. There's very little to choose between them there in terms of what you want and what you get. And at right back, I think if you're going to win the Champions League with the games that City had, I do choose Kyle Walker against PSG, against PSG, or against Bayern Munich or against Real Madrid. I do choose that. Hakimi is fantastic at getting forward, but there's no right answer there. Mendes brilliant going forward, but it depends what you want. If you want to lock down a game away at the Bernabeu, you choose the City's back line. If you want to go forward and score, you probably choose theirs. Look, the centre-backs, I would take Stones and Diaz every single day. I think they were unbelievable partnership at the time. And the midfield, look, Ruiz, Vitinha and João Neves, I don't take that over Rodri, De Bruyne and Gundogan. I think maybe one of them gets in there, but Rodri walks in and De Bruyne walks in easily. And after that, then once again, Gundogan's peak experience. It's ours. I think it really is. I think this City side would have absolutely smothered them. Look, Kvaratskhelia clearly walks in over Jack Grealish, I reckon, because he has that similar level of sort of the way he holds the ball, but he also has an added goal threat that is you can't question. I think if you want to have the run that City had to win a treble in that era, in that kind of game, and in the Premier League, not League One, you choose Bernardo Silva. You probably do over Doué. And I think as good as Doué is, I think Mara at his best was still probably better. Gundogan was a beast then, and someone says Vitinha over Gundo. Walter, I get that, mate. But I still think Gundogan, look, the clutch goals in big games, a brace in a final against Man United in the FA Cup, ridiculously hard to win a treble and also beat your rivals at the same time. Gundogan's experience and composure in his leadership, you can't ignore the question of that. And I do think experience plays into this. This is a young PSG side, and I think look at the sides that they played. I really do believe European football wasn't quite as good as well last season as it was when City were winning. I'm biased, I would say that, but look, they played an Arsenal side they were sort of toothless in the semi-finals. Arsenal had dropped off a little bit in terms of their joy. Arteta's sides, in my opinion, have got sort of lesser and lesser since that first treble season. The treble season when they probably should have won it, where they were, and the Arsenal season last year was great at smothering, but they were nowhere near as electric or as fun to witness. And I think PSG were just better. PSG were more like City, but City were better than that side that PSG had against Arsenal, in my opinion. And then you look at their other results. Aston Villa, look, they scraped past Aston Villa, who were a great side, but come on, Aston Villa was good, but they aren't touching that Manchester City treble winning side. They're not getting close. Before that, who did they play? A Liverpool side, vastly in decline, but then still went to win the league. Of course, look, Liverpool side, once again, Liverpool side won the league last year. But that Liverpool side still nowhere near as good as the standards, in my opinion, of City's treble winning side, I truly believe that. Bernardo much better than Doué. I truly look. Bernardo is Pete, by the way, better than Doué massively. Like Bernardo, what he did at the Bernabeu. Doué's great, but he's still a young lad, and I don't see City ever losing a game like they did against Chelsea in the Club World Cup final. The space there, the naivety, it was just so open. And before that, you get into the group stage, which is a weird sort of mess. It was very hard to take that seriously, the group stage. They beat Stuttgart as well in the group stage, and who else? They beat City, of course. Look, we were winning 2-0 against this PSG side, by the way, until we absolutely, bottled it. It could have been a totally different story for their season entirely. But I do believe this. I think this City side is underappreciated. I think they're a phenomenal Manchester City side. And as good as this PSG side is, I think anything they had to offer, I think City would have handled it. If you look at like City versus, Bayern or Real Madrid, and look, we played Sevilla and Dortmund in the run as well, Leipzig, and I think it was Copenhagen as well, wasn't it? We played some really good sides, Inter Milan as well. The Inter Milan side we played were much better than the Inter Milan side that they played in the final in the end. Inter Milan were bruised and battered by the end of that Champions League run last season. They weren't the same side. They dropped a little bit in their standards. And I feel for me, what they had to offer, City experienced and smothered and handled in their Champions League run. I am biased, but I do truly believe that City treble side had everything, and I think they beat more or less anyone, really, because the way they were playing at the time, you couldn't get the ball of them. You had Bernardo everywhere. You had De Bruyne and Rodri scoring wonder goals at will. You had Haaland scoring 50 goals in that season. You couldn't really get the ball off City's centre midfielders. You couldn't get past them. They were so structurally organised. You had the most ridiculously composed, aggressive defensive partnerships there. Everywhere was a partnership. Everywhere was organised. It was so hard to score against that City side. It was just one of those moments in time that made it impossible to play against. And this is my big claim here. That City side would have been the greatest challenge to that Barcelona side. The great Barcelona side, because they were so organised. The great Barcelona side probably still beats anyone, but I don't think there's ever been a side that was prepared tactically, technically, with individual brilliance and defensively and structurally to challenge that Manchester City, that Barcelona side better than that City side, And we're talking, Finn Parshy's talking about transitions. I'm talking about back then, mate. No team could transition against us. We were brilliant. We were so organised. And this is the thing, we had no real weaknesses. We had just truly no weaknesses in that City side. It was brilliant. And I think about every way you could get at us. We could win balls in the air. We were great in terms of scoring goals at set pieces. We were great at passing it out from the back. We were great with options off the bench. We were great at unlocking defences. We just had everything. We could battle, we could bully, we could kick, we could fight, we could scrap. And I think Grealish said he felt invincible for an awful long time. PSG side full of wonderful, effervescent energy. Dembele, brilliant. Dewey, fantastic. Kvaratskhelia, fantastic. That's nothing we didn't face, you know. We faced like Benzema, at his brilliant best in that run, and we handled him absolutely fine, you know. We faced world-class wingers, Real Madrid absolutely flying with quality out wide, and we handled them. Bayern flying, and we handled them. Arsenal at their effervescent best, and we handled them. United, to beat them in a final to treble, we handled it. Like, yeah, it's a quick video, but I truly believe that City's treble winning side is incredibly underrated. Maybe not the most star-ridden team you'll ever see when you look at the great sides, but the organisation, just ridiculous. And yeah, the fact that Bayern and Madrid, they were good sides. They were brilliant sides. Real Madrid was still a fantastic side. They're not the side they are now, which is pretty poor, if we're being honest, by their great standards. They struggled against us because we smothered them and we were brilliant. So I'm going to go for City, you know. I do think we underestimate the City side too much. The Barcelona treble side they are a freakish side because they had Messi, they had Iniesta, they had Xavi, but you give the ball to Messi and he would terrify teams. But I think City would be more equipped than more or less any side in history to deal with them. I believe that, because we could make them suffer too, and we could get the ball up the pitch. And we had Haaland, who would have given, you know, PK and Ramos, with his pace and physicality, with De Bruyne's crossing, a very tough side. And we had Rodri, who could keep the ball as good as anyone. We had Gundogan, who would have the kind of guy who would have played for that side as well. Look, I don't know, but I wanted to come here and do a quick video and talk about City versus PSG. For me, it's City. Easy. I think it is. PSG are a cracking side, and they would have given us a great game. But ultimately, over two... not Ramos, I meant Puyol, sorry. Not Ramos. Tired. PK and Puyol. Ignore me, mate. Very tired. Mahrez wasn't even in the side. Mahrez would have started for that PSG side as well. Look, I mean, we have to defend this City side for a reason. I am clearly inherently biased, but I do think this City side was phenomenal. They hit a once-in-a-lifetime spark of magic that just achieved wonderful, vibrant, effervescent things, and I love that City side. Do let me know in the chat what you would make of City versus PSG. Who would you take? Look, you absolutely would take Mendes in that side, but for a big game, I wouldn't change that game. You take Hakimi, but I wouldn't change Walker. You take Kvaratskhelia, he would definitely start. Dembele over Haaland, you wouldn't change it. Dewey over Bernardo Silva is best on Morris. I don't think you'd change it either. Maybe one of those midfielders gets in. The centre-backs I wouldn't change. I think it's City's experience counts in these kind of games. I truly believe it does. And you've got to bear in mind, City won 3 leagues in a row as well. And they had Guardiola. And as good as Luis Enrique is, I still think Guardiola is a better manager. And I think you go... You know, if you talk about 12 options in terms of managers and 11 players, I think you go about 8 out of 12 for City there, you know. Guys, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you would go in terms of combined 11 between these two sides. I'm hoping some City news kicks off soon because it is very dead and I need to do some videos and get cracking and chatting to you. If you want to see any more of these sort of topic videos where we have a hypothetical discussion, let me know in the comments below. Fingers crossed some news will kick off soon, and if so, I will be live. Bye-bye. Up the Blues. Up the treble winning Blues. Feels like a lifetime ago. It was 2 years. Bye-bye.